Hello and welcome to our portfolio project for our organizational leadership capstone. My name is Jonathan Heylman, and this portfolio project is going to look at some of the leadership lessons learned during the course of our CSU Global Masters of Leadership program experience. So here's an introduction to some of the things we're going to look at during the course of this PowerPoint presentation. First, we'll look at organizational team dynamics, the impact of diversity and communication. We'll look at some effective leadership concepts, such as leadership styles and how to engage followers. And we'll also look at organizational culture and leadership and how the two interact with each other, the impact of leadership on culture, and how to affect cultural change through leadership. And finally, we'll look at some lessons learned and kind of sum up our experience here at CSU Global. So the first concept we're going to look at here is diversity, the role and impact of diversity within an organization. Diversity within an organization is much more than just a statistic. Now, when we first started at CSU, we kind of looked at diversity as one of the important things that a company has to report to make them look good to their shareholders and show them how inclusive the organization is. But more than that, diversity actually has a impact on the productivity of an organization, where the more diversity, more gender and race diversity an organization has, the more productive that organization can be. And as diversity increases, both gender and race, employee trust and engagement also increase. And this really helps leadership to reach the employees when they can look around and see that no matter what background, no matter where they come from, the organization values your input. And on the other hand, a lack of diversity can erode the trust among employees with leadership. And it can honestly put an organization, a lack of diversity can put an organization at a competitive disadvantage. When you have a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, you have a lot of different viewpoints on how to solve an issue. And that kind of diversity is exactly the type of thing that can make an organization more competitive and more productive versus other companies that they're competing with. Now, the second concept we're going to dive into here in organizational team dynamics is communication. Effective communication really is essential to an organization's mission. People have to know what you expect of them. People have to know what you want of them. And the only way to do that is through effective communication. Communication from your leadership is really the best way to effectively convey and execute the vision and the direction of the organization, to convey the expectations that leadership has for people. And effective communication is more than just a top-down function. Leaders have to listen to and have to respond to communication that comes from the bottom up as well. It is honestly a two-way street where leaders have to be able to communicate their expectations but also listen to feedback from employees about the direction of the organization. Successful organizations then are ones that create an open and honest loop for two-way communication at all levels. And that's one thing that this experience at CSU has really highlighted through case studies and through examining other examples. Two-way communication and open communication at all levels is what separates highly successful organizations from those which are not so successful. So we move our focus now onto some of the theories behind effective leadership. One of the things that goes into really effective leadership is the concept of leadership styles. Organizations and leaders within these organizations have really evolved over the last 70 years. From the early 1900s, you had the discourse style organization with leaders who directed and dictated, honestly, what was happening within the organization. They said it and you did it. And now we have the more modern eco-leadership discourse, where it's more of a participative process, where everybody's involved in the process. Everybody's involved in the transformation, the direction of the organization. Leaders within these organizations now have a number of styles that they can choose from. Great man leadership, there's therapist leadership, transformational servant leadership, the styles theory. There's a lot of different leadership styles available to be employed by organizational leaders. But the key that we've behind these leadership styles that we've learned at CSU is that you have to be able to adapt your leadership styles to the situation and employ them authentically. It's like a toolbox. If you only had one tool inside of your toolbox, it'd be difficult to accomplish all the tasks that you have around the house, right? But many tools within your toolbox give you the opportunity and the tools that you need to do any job. And leadership styles are the same concept behind leadership styles. You have to have the ability to adapt your leadership style to the situation and employ these leadership styles authentically to engage your followers and really get them involved and on board with the direction of the organization. And when we talk about getting employees involved with the direction of the organization, really what we're talking about is the concept of engaging your followers, engaging your employees. Now, in previous years, in times past, it was automatically assumed that employees were motivated by pay and benefits, so that if you gave them more pay, more benefits, they would be more committed to the organization. And recent studies have shown that that actually is false. It is not the pay and benefits that people are engaged, that make people engage with the organization. It's more the people that they work with and the people that they work for. And these people, this engagement, this organizational commitment is directly related to how leaders can engage their employees to increase the buy-in, increase consensus with the direction of the organization, and trust. And this goes back to using effective leadership styles in order to do this. To engage employees, leaders then have to employ an adaptive approach to leadership, like we talked about before, utilizing their different styles, and then going back to the concept of communication, have to have open and honest communication at all levels again to increase the trust and the commitment within the organization. This is something that the experience at CSU has really borne out in all of the examples that we've looked at. You have to bring together all of these different concepts at once to get the most out of your people so that they can be the most productive and get the most for your organization. So the next concept we're going to look at is organizational culture and leadership's impact on it. Now, there's a lot of things that go into the culture of an organization, but leadership has one of the highest impacts on an organizational culture, either positively or negatively. If leadership engages their people, if they emphasize diversity, if they emphasize a participative process, they communicate effectively at all levels to their employees, and there's that two-way communication that we talked about earlier, that will increase trust, positively affects trust and communication throughout the organization, and sets a really high standard for culture. On the other hand, however, on a negative note, if you have toxic or directive or dictatorial leadership that does not value employee input, then that's going to negatively affect the trust and erode the culture of the organization. The culture is driven by the vision and the mission of the organization, and for better or for worse, positive or negative, the leaders are the ones who set this, organizational leaders are the ones who set this vision and this mission. And whether or not the corporation is going to, or the organization is going to follow their vision and mission depends on the leader's ability to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. And modern leaders have to drive the organization's vision towards sustainability to fully engage employees. In modern organizations, sustainability as far as resources or concepts such as CSR are extremely important to newer generations of workers. They want to know that their organization values the environment, that they value sustainability. So that vision and that mission has to be set by leaders. And again, they have to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk in order to fully engage their employees and set a high standard for culture throughout the organization. Now, in an organization that finds itself in need of a culture change, either the culture has become stagnant or maybe there's a negative standard throughout the organization and the culture is in need of a change, this has to come from leadership. It depends on leadership's ability to change the culture. They're key to changing the culture within an organization because they have to set the direction, again, set the vision of the organization. They have to build employee consensus on the direction of the organization, affect the change, and then refreeze the organization's culture, set the standard, and make sure everybody is accountable to it. To set the new cultural direction of the organization, leaders should create a participative conversation among employees. So employees should be involved in this process. What do you as the employee like about the organization? What do you not like? And where should we go in the future so that they can engage employees the most, get the most out of employees, the most productivity, the most engagement. The participative process of involving employees in the culture change ensures that the result of the organizational culture change will make most everybody happy, engage the employees, and strengthen organizational engagement. But again, this has to come from leadership, and leadership has to, for lack of a better term, walk the walk, participate in the change, set the standard, and hold everyone accountable. So now we want to sum this up by looking at some lessons learned throughout the experience at CSU Global in the Masters of Organizational Leadership program. This is very difficult. If someone was to ask, what were the lessons learned? What were the concepts taught during the Masters of Organizational Leadership program? It's really hard to sum up 2 years worth of information into a couple of these statements. So this took a lot of effort, but we can look at just a couple of different things that have come out in each of the courses that have borne true no matter how many times you've looked at case studies or anything else. The first one is that leadership is a two-way street. So without leaders, an organization really is lost. They set the standard for the organization. But if those leaders don't have followers, then an organization is going to be extremely ineffective, or those followers don't have trust in their leadership. Then an organization is honestly going to be ineffective. Leaders have to then create an open and honest environment where employee input is valued and accepted, no matter what the background is on those employees, no matter where they come from, no matter their gender, their race, their creed, any of that. You have to open up the environment, open up the culture to everyone in the organization, creating that two-way street that we talked about earlier. Leadership styles are not one size fits all. There are so many leadership styles to choose from, but not one of them is more effective than the other. Situationally, they can be employed for maximum effect, but there isn't one that is always going to be more effective than the other. Leaders have to be authentic with their leadership and adaptable. You have to listen to your followers. You have to examine the issues from multiple sides and employ multiple different styles of leadership in order to get the most out of your employees and your followers. And employees want to follow leaders who engage and inspire them rather than people who just control them. The do as I say, not as I do, or do as I say because I'm the boss mentality it doesn't have a place in modern organizations. You really have to create a participative two-way street, again, for lack of a better term. And of course, leadership requires practice, involvement, and education to be effective. No one is going to show up into a leadership role and know everything that they have to do and be perfect at it. It requires practice, it requires involvement, and it requires education, learning from mistakes, and moving forward with your leadership experience to become the best leader that you can be. And finally here, this last statement is from more of a personal perspective, but takes into account all the things that have been learned during this experience at CSU Global. And you can really we can sum up our outlook on leadership in one phrase. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of you. And that means regardless of where they come from, regardless of anything, you take care of them, get them what they need, listen to their problems, try and solve their issues, and they will take care of you. Meaning, on the other side of this, you'll get the kind of productivity engagement out of them that you need to be successful as a leader if you take care of them. So we conclude this presentation by looking again at some of the things we talked about. We talked about organizational team dynamics, the impact of diversity, the positive and negative impacts of diversity or a lack of diversity, the importance of communication, two-way street communication, again, for lack of a better term, some effective leadership concepts, leadership styles, the multitude of styles and how there's no one-size-fits-all approach. We talked about how to engage followers for maximum productivity. And we talked about organizational culture and leadership, the impact leadership has on culture, and how to affect cultural change through leadership, before we finally looked at some lessons learned over the course of our experience at CSU Global. So that's it. That concludes this presentation of our portfolio project for our organizational leadership capstone. Thank you for your time, and I really just wish to extend a thank you to all of the staff at CSU Global for what was really an awesome experience through these last 2 years working on this master's. So thank you very, very much, and good luck to everybody going forward.